Welcome. No, I'm not muted. Welcome to the JOCO. Welcome, YouTube viewers. We have been on hiatus for a few months. And so this is our first public JOCO, public sit down and conversation since February. And we are happy to be back and welcome all involved. So we ask, if you are in the Zoom, that you mute your mic. If you're not speaking, and we recommend you select a speaker view to see our guest on screen or the speaker highlighted on screen. The JOCO takes different forms at different times, and the last several JOCOs, we've moved away from panels and are having individual conversations, or conversations with individuals, I should say. However, we do want to open it up for questions when we're done asking our questions. So do use the chat or the raise hand icon if you have any questions. And well, we won't have a panelist, right? As I just got through saying, we have one special guest. We always like to acknowledge that we do this work on the unceded lands of the Tongva and the Chumash peoples of what is now called Southern California, and in particular, the Los Angeles Basin and coastal region. It's always important to remember that we live in a settler colonial state, and the First Nations of this region, recognized or not by the state that has colonized the region, still exist, still struggle, still move forward. So our subject today, over the last few years, the JOCO has decided to think about the future, right? Thinking about the world we want, a more just world. How we go about creating that world, looking at trying to take a close look at the world as it is, how it has come to be, and what it'll take to create the world we want. And in some ways, by happenstance, we decided to do so following the 9 areas of human activity that are outlined by Neely Fuller and made more well known by Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And we've come to our last of the people activity areas, entertainment. And under entertainment, right, we're looking at, all that encompasses in the modern world, in this contemporary world. And so are starting with media and all of its various forms. So
you're muted. We cannot hear you.
am I muted?
You were.
The whole time?
No, just when you began to read the...
Okay, I'm unmuted. Am I still unmuted? What's going on?
We can hear you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can hear me again. All right, thank you. So let me go back. And I just started reading. In all recorded history, and in what is called prehistory, there's been the practice of creating public messages, from the rock paintings of the Sahara and the Kalahari to the instantaneous global communications of this electronic age. The mechanisms that convey information to the collective are as central to human culture as language itself. Media creates the common frame of reference, the common consciousness, a function made more critical as contiguous societies grow larger and face-to-face interpersonal exchange becomes more truncated. Under the influence of capitalism, we gather incidentally because we are buying from a common proprietor at the store, movie house, college, gym, dance club, and so on. We don't gather for directly personal critical conversations about this world. Instead, we rely and must rely on media mechanisms to select, show, and interpret world events and to indicate what we must do in and about those events. Social effects of a mass media organized around corporate interest, which inevitably translate into maintaining power relations status quo, are clear. We want to explore how media can best function to create an in common, humane consciousness across vast spaces and time. We begin our series on media with the question, what is the role of journalism in creating the world we want? And to begin to answer that question, we have invited Thandisizwe Chimurenga. Thandisizwe Chimurenga is an award-winning Los Angeles-based journalist, a former assistant editor of the LA Watts Times newspaper, and a former reporter and co-anchor for Free Speech Radio News and the KPFK Evening News. She is the author of No Doubt, The Murders, S in parentheses, of Oscar Grant, Reparations, Not Yet, A Case for Reparations and Why We Must Wait, and the soon-to-be published Some of Us Are Brave, Interviews and Conversations with Sisters on Life, Art, and Struggle, published by, is that Daraja Press?
Yes.
Daraja Press. Welcome, Thandi. We're really happy to have you here. And we'll start our conversation. So, we want to, well, actually, before I start, do you have any opening comments before I start asking questions?
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've been an observer from afar of your work for a while now. So thank you for thinking of me and having me on board.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's
get my technology together.
Okay. Yeah, right. It's a tech world.
Okay.
I used to wonder about that as a kid, right? Didn't realize I was living in the space age as I was in the middle of it.
Right.
So we wanted to start with some questions about social media and its effects with it being so widespread.
Mm-hmm.
Do platforms like Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Do they truncate discourse in subjects that require sustained analysis? And how so?
I'd start out by saying they absolutely truncate it. Twitter, as you know, has a character limit.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram is actually geared toward the visual. And there are times when people do what I call, they write dissertations or theses, either as the captions or within the comments.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really designed for that. And if you're thinking about visual going in and you see all of this text, you're like, we know about the various arguments and wars that happen on Facebook and Twitter, etc. I think they're very good starting points. I think that they're absolutely good for amplifying publicity, for helping to mobilize, but they're not really geared toward sustained analysis. Utilizing them as part of your campaign to get people talking. But, that also calls into play activism and organizing. And so I came into media from an activist background, and I differentiate between activism and organizing. Writing is a form of activism. Being a radio host can be utilized as a form of activism, being active, being vocal, amplifying struggles. But an organizer is one who is kind of like an administrator, a person who's very, very patient and can see the big picture, has a vision, knows about strategy, tactics, plans, organizes, executes, is able to mobilize people and resources through a campaign effectively towards an end goal. And they may or may not be victorious. That's different from, mobilizing and getting out there and shouting with your fist in the air. So as part of effective organizing and activism, there should be a media plan. Media must be taken into account. And by media, I mean the traditional media, news, the press, television, radio, print, and also new forms of media, what's called the new media, social media, digital media, YouTube, the utilization of cell phones, utilization of tablets, small computer devices, as opposed to these great big bulky computers. There was a time when, way back in the day, computers took up a whole room.
Right.
Then you had a desktop computer. Then you had laptops. Then you had notebooks. Then you had these little things you hold in your hand that you can talk on, which is also a computer, a smartphone. So being able to effectively utilize all of these things, but they are not the end all be all. They are a means to the end all.
Right. So where are people getting their analysis then now? I mean, if you could posit an answer.
I haven't the faintest. I was hoping y'all could tell me.
Right.
Because some of the stuff I see, I'm like, okay. So after my initial shock, I was like, okay, you're obviously an agent. You're a plant. You're a troll. You're here to sow divisiveness and discord. And it works a lot of times. A lot of times because people don't have background information, they fall into that trap,
right,
of engaging in what they think is dialogue with people, and maybe not even actual human beings, entities whose sole purpose is to keep you arguing, but also to sow discord. The other thing about an organizer is patient. An organizer is very, very patient. When you hear people say the patience of Job, that's a biblical reference. Organizers can wait it out. I am not an organizer. And I know I'm not an organizer. That's why my form of activism is writing, is social media. I don't have the patience. There are people who have the patience of Job in social media, on Twitter, on Facebook. And if you check in with them periodically, you can see the progression of how they're able to sometimes change dialogue, change an individual's thought pattern, I think, if that's the same person they've been arguing with, right?
Right.
But there are, I mean, just as actually one of my tweets, I don't know if it went viral, but it had thousands of likes and retweets. I talked about, as a good example, you have what is called the diaspora wars with that alphabet group who I shall not name. And I said, my tweet talked about the fact that the Watts Writers Workshop was burned down by an FBI informant, codename Othello, Darthur Perry. These people paid this man to infiltrate a writers' workshop. That's diaspora wars, diaspora of African people versus, the the diaspora, African people, Caribbean folks, Black folks in Europe versus Black people born and raised here in the United States of America, descendants of Africans who were brought over here in enslavement. So I was saying that this individual was a paid informant inserted into a writer's workshop.
That's right.
A creative writing workshop. And as an agent provocateur, actually, he burned down the building. Now, if the FBI, the state, is paying someone to do that, you don't think they're going to pay somebody to send out a laptop all day long? Talking about Black people in Britain and Africa think they better than Black folks over here? And we just have to unite as Black folks just here and the hell with every other Black people in the world?
Right.
You don't think somebody gonna do that? So a lot of these individuals that you're arguing with, you know, sometimes we don't know who they are. We don't know based upon their profile picture. They may have stolen an actual Black person's profile picture when they're not a Black person, or they're a robot, or they're just a paid agent. We don't know their real name. We don't know nothing about who these people are. But like I said, if you don't have access to information and you see what they're putting out and they seem halfway articulate, you might be convinced by their argument. And you might begin to parrot the exact same thing. So there's dangers out there also. But just because there's a danger out there, it does not mean that we do not utilize social media. It does not mean that we do not utilize these platforms. We need to learn how to utilize them effectively. Twitter is how I found out about Mike Brown.
Okay.
And people were on the ground tweeting from Ferguson, Missouri. People were tweeting links to articles. Links to websites where other people had background information. So again, it's a question of using things effectively.
How are you going to use the tools? So, well, that really does lead into the next question. Do you see any positive effects of the constraints of that brevity on Twitter and other platforms that require brevity?
Well, again, I think it's a marriage that needs to be out in the open between activism / organizing, and media. What is the media plan?
What's the plan?
What is your media plan? What is your plan to utilize and engage media? So, but now the other thing, there's on the one hand, there's that. On another hand, you have particular platforms that have been set up specifically around sustained discourse and analysis. And of course, the first one that comes to my mind is Black Power Media.
Okay, yes.
Which utilizes Instagram, it utilizes Twitter, utilizes Facebook, but is housed basically at YouTube. So you go there to see the videos either live or via playback, sort of like this one, where you can see people engaged with thinkers, with actual organizers on the ground, with movement elders who have knowledge and wisdom that needs to be passed on so we don't keep creating these same mistakes. So there are those. So there's the question of how do we utilize these platforms and who's actually using the platforms, making it their own to do what it is in order that needs to be done.
All right. So then this access, right? The ability to get a YouTube channel, to get a Twitter account, does that translate as democratization of journalism, or even democratization of access to information?
I want to say, unfortunately, yes. Everybody who got an opinion now has access. It don't mean they got information. First of all, it don't mean they got the right information, but they got the access.
Yes.
And now they can amplify their nonsense. But in all seriousness, though, it is a form of democratization. Everyone has access. And by everyone, I'll give you another example. I do a monthly forum with sister friends based out of Atlanta, Georgia, first Fridays. I come as a journalist. We have the sister who conceived of it and hosted it is a practicing psychologist. We've got a historian. We've got a spiritual worker, minister, Ianifa. We've got a African-American literature scholar and an anthropologist. And we come together and chop it up. And we were talking about the 1619 Project on Hulu. Now, the 1619 Project by Nicole Hannah-Jones, who's now a professor, she's a journalist, now a professor at Howard University. It started out as a series of essays at the New York Times where she was based. But now it's a 6-part series on Hulu. Very well done, very professional, by the way. Everybody doesn't have access to the New York Times.
Right.
Everybody doesn't want access to the New York Times. Everybody ain't gonna read these essays in the New York Times, no matter how many passwords you share. But everybody's sharing passwords with Netflix and Hulu and blah, 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 blah. We're already sharing those passwords.
Right.
So you've got access to the 1619 Project on Hulu. All you needed to know was know about it. And if you ain't got a password already, you know at least one person you can call up, hey, let me use your password.
That's right.
Netflix say they're cracking down on passwords now. My point being the access and the desire were already there to get you to viewing the 1619 Project. And while I'm on that subject, let me also mention too, that's the end game of all of this, right? Put something in front of you visual or a brevity, a bite to get you to something deeper, like the essays or the book of the 1619 Project that you can read and absorb and critique.
All right. What about the effect of social media? And really, I think you've spoken to this, its effects on veracity in information, and whether we can authenticate, what's out there in the public discourse.
So now I'm thinking, now you're bringing back all of these horrible social media nightmare memories of mine. So anyway, I happened upon a troll, and this troll was spewing some madness. It just didn't sit right with me. And I was like, okay, well, that's not right. That's not right. That's not, and eventually, if you've never been in a social media argument, what's going to happen is you're going to get blocked by that person.
Right.
That's not a bad thing. But if people have been following along the discussion, you no longer have access to whoever that particular audience was. Right. But when you say what the effects on the veracity, people get on here and say some of anything. They say some of anything. And I'm not even sure if I should use this language with your audience. I don't know. Should I?
Sure. Go ahead.
I saw, was it a tweet? Yeah, it was a tweet. I saw a tweet one day and the person said, people will get on here and say anything. Example, Charlie Brown had hoes. No, he didn't. Charlie Brown didn't have hoes. That's literally what goes on in these social media streets.
Yes.
I saw a tweet or a series of tweets by this guy who is, all he had to do was say, I don't like Angela Davis. I don't like feminists. I don't like lesbians. I don't really like Black women. But if he had said that, that really might not have drawn you in. So he says Angela Davis outed Assata Shakur. And that's why she's an enemy of the people. And I'm just sitting here like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So he goes and finds a clip from 2020, I think, after the George Floyd uprising, where Angela Davis is on Russia Today talking about uprisings and protests and mentions about Assata being in Cuba. And I'm like, Assata told us she was in Cuba. in the 1980s.
Okay.
And he says, there's still people who didn't know where she was. And then I was like, okay, so now,
Man.
see, part of the problem is you start
Oh,
trying
man.
to actually
Oh.
rationalize what this, you try to understand what they're saying when you knew automatically it was crazy, right?
Right.
So after a while, yeah, he blocked me. I was like, what are you, huh?
Exactly. That was,
Asada
you thought that was a
Shakur
secret?
outed herself.
Out. Okay.
Just to let she, hey y'all, I landed, I'm safe. You know how you do when you let me know when you get home.
I'll let.
Call me when you get home, text me when you get home. Flick your, you drop
Okay.
somebody off, flick your light. She in the house safe. Ain't no murder in there. Asada told her she was good.
Asada told her she was good, but
It's like,
his
wow.
brother said Angela Davis outed her in 2020. Yeah.
He used
Well,
the word,
that
he used the word
deficit in
outed, brother.
information. Oh my gosh.
He used the word outed. I was like, wow, you're
Hey,
a troll.
there it is, right there it
And
is.
after, and you saw afterwards the conversation, somebody told me because they had been watching the thread after I got booted off. He eventually started talking about feminism and lesbians. Like, well, why don't you just say that in the beginning?
Right.
Don't come up with this crap.
Right.
See, it's our faves, as we say, our faves. We have faves on TV and we have faves in the movement. Let's just be honest about that. All right.
Yeah.
All of our faves are problematic.
Yeah.
All of our faves have issues. And there are enough problems and enough issues out there. You ain't got to lie.
Right.
You ain't got to lie on these people.
Exactly.
But the problem with social media and not the problem of democracy, mind you, but the problem of social media, the democratization being in ubiquitous in everyone's hands, in children's, young people's hands who don't have the history, going around spouting, yeah, Angela Davis, yeah, she wrong for that. She outed Asada. You don't even know who Asada is.
Because they don't know. Right.
What are you talking about?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
So
why
you mentioned being blocked.
Which is why every organization should have a media plan. Whatever your agenda, your plan is, factor in media to amplify your message, amplify your findings, get them out there into the world.
And get them out there in the world.
Yeah. Before somebody says, Brother Yusef outed Asada Shakur.
Yeah. That's right. I let it out the bag. Okay. In 2023.
In 2023.
Okay. The so being blocked, right? Sometimes it's the platform that blocks people, right? Because you mentioned Black Power Media, and I know for a minute they were suspended over something, right?
Right.
So this suppression of content, has it affected your work, and how do you manage those hurdles?
It has not affected my work yet, but sometimes there's the suppression. And then there's the what's the word? You have to forgive me. I get this short-term memory loss. I'm not sure what the word is, but when you have a paywall, you can't get to the content unless you actually paying for a subscription of some sort. That's prohibitive also.
Yeah, it is.
But the suppression is the actual purposeful blocking. You've got YouTube, which is primarily videos, but you can utilize it for audio. And visuals, photographs, which is what I've seen. I've seen people put up on YouTube, and this was in the early days, and I'm sure they still do it. If they don't have the actual video from a record company of your favorite group's song, somebody will record the song from their record player, if they still got a record player, and put up photos of the group. And that's on YouTube. That's on the visual platform. So there's the visual platform, YouTube. Again, you've got Instagram, which is geared more towards photos. They eventually, within the last couple of years, have allowed reels or videos. Facebook, Twitter, which was 140 characters, they may have lengthened it. I'm not sure, but primarily text. You can get just over possibly a minute of video, which is not enough to give you full context.
Right.
But Twitter does have that capability. Facebook, you can broadcast live, you can put up videos, all you want. So of the various platforms, if you are suppressed, well, allegedly, if you're suppressed on one, blocked on one, you can go to the others in a workaround. But now you've got Facebook founder Zuckerberg, who owns Instagram. I'm not sure if they own YouTube yet, but they probably looking into it. So what's happening with social media platforms is the same thing that happens with quote unquote traditional or mainstream media. Begins to consolidate.
Consolidation.
One person owning multiple spheres of influence. So that's the nature of the place we live in. You know, in the United States, and being a center of capitalism and imperialism. Until that's overthrown, there's always going to be that problem. So we continue to resist creatively by doing what we can, utilizing, go around it and utilize the other platform and you get banned from one. There's Twitch out there. I wonder, TikTok, yeah. Now they've already banned TikTok in the state of Montana.
Right.
Another ban could be coming to a state near you. Until that time, you utilize the other forms of media. Am I supposed to pay attention to, are these questions in the chat or?
No, I think that's just Mila commenting.
Okay.
Yeah, just commenting. She's in the amen corner, I believe.
Amen. And all right, Ashe.
So Twitch. I'm personally unfamiliar with Twitch. This is like another Twitter type platform.
I found out about Twitch because of its video capabilities, but my understanding is that it's a gaming platform.
Okay, interesting.
Like which is another innovation. You and I are old enough to remember Atari.
Yep.
Little thing ping pong. Well, now video games are now at a point where you and I could play the same game and it can be broadcast. So that same technology has allowed you and I to log in at the same time, play the same game, you in your living room, I'm in my living room, but we can also play with somebody else in another house or somebody in another state. And others can watch us play and say, I got next. So my understanding is Twitch is that video gaming platform. But I'm not into video games. I'm not not a gamer. So even though I have an account, I don't use it.
So it's a gaming platform, but that people are, besides the gamers, people are using as another type of social media information.
Absolutely. I want to say it was Twitch. I could be wrong. So let me put that caveat out there. Journalists have to have facts or else you ain't a journalist. I want to say that the shooter in Rochester broadcast portions of his murder spree on Twitch. It was broadcast on something and then immediately, taken down. But I'm not sure.
I think, as I recall, I believe I read that also, though I'm not positive either, but I think, I do remember seeing Twitch or have it. That sounds right. And it's video, so it's like another YouTube that's for gamers rather than like a Twitter platform.
Right.
Okay. Let's keep going. If we want to move to our second set of questions that are looking at this, what you've already brought up, right? Corporate ownership. Oh, wait a minute. No. Speaking of corporate ownership, I had a thought. You were talking about Mr. Zuckerberg, and I was thinking about this fellow Elon Musk owning Twitter. Does he have any other social media platforms that you might know of? Like, is he owning Reddit or one of these other ones?
To my knowledge, he doesn't own any other social media platforms. Every time I see his name mentioned, other than being talked about for doing something stupid, Twitter, I saw his name recently. something, I don't know if it was about going to Mars or,
Mm,
I mean, he's a businessman. We know him from Tesla. Jeff Bezos with Amazon has purchased the Washington Post.
mhm.
These are multimillionaires, billionaires. These are business people and groups of business people who own these platforms. Now, Zuckerberg didn't start out as a multimillionaire or billionaire. He is one now.
Mhm.
And these are the people who control media and media platforms.
Yeah.
They are not journalists. They are not historians. They are simply business people. And it is in their interest to make money.
Yeah.
And if a platform like a Twitter, or should I say, well, the platform of Twitter, which led to the creation of Black Twitter, once people heard that Elon Musk was going to be owning Twitter, people was like, all right, y'all, I'm out. It's been beautiful. It's been wonderful. It's been life-saving, but I'm gone. People were giving their testimonies of how Twitter had changed their life.
Mhm.
And they were saddened now that Elon Musk had gotten a hold to it. So afraid of what he was going to do to it. So these are the people who are currently in charge of our platforms. And to my knowledge, I don't know of any. Roland Martin has an app, the Black Star Network.
Okay.
Roland Martin, I think I don't think he was initially with BET. I know he had been an analyst for CNN
Mhm.
and got the boot from there. Tavis Smiley started out on BET.
That's right.
Eventually went to NPR. BET owned by a Black man, started by a Black man.
Mhm.
We thought it was, finally, he was a businessman. He is a
Right.
businessman.
Mr. Johnson, right?
Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson sold BET for billions of dollars.
Yes, he
So
did.
the fact, we want to support Black owned. We need Black owned. And Black owned has done right by us on many occasions.
Mhm.
There have also been occasions when they've done us wrong.
Mhm. That's right. Like Tasha said, a businessman, right? So.
Businessman. Byron Allen currently owns the Griot.
Mhm.
Byron Allen will tell you, I'm a businessman. If he's telling you who he is, don't try and rewrite who he is.
That's right.
He is not the
Byron been
savior
about
of Black
business since
media.
he was in high school. That's Byron been about it since. So yeah.
He already told us who he was.
Yep. So who said that? Was it Maya? People tell you who they are, believe them.
And they believe him the first time.
Believe them the first time. That's
Believe
right.
him the first time. Does that mean that we don't utilize the Griot? Of course not.
That's right.
The root has never been Black owned. The root was hard hitting at one point.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was.
Does that mean that we and the root owned by Washington Post, which is now owned by Jeff Bezos, does that mean that we do not utilize the root? Of course not.
Mm-hmm.
Of course not. Everything taken with a grain of salt, of course.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Keep a little critical distance. Don't believe everything you read. Right.
Don't believe everything.
Right.
But read it.
But read it.
Can you at least read it?
That's right. That's right.
Mm.
So what about your own highlights or challenges of your work, right? And we call you a people's journalist, right? And some of our, getting the word out, we're having people's journalists come in, somebody who practice emancipatory journalism.
Mm.
So you want to share any highlights or challenges from your career?
Let's start with the challenges and get them out the way.
Yeah.
Money, resources are always a challenge. Always a challenge. Always a challenge. Trying to overcome them, working on overcoming them. There's no shortage of stories that need to be told. Content has never been the problem, has never been the issue. I won't even say that time is an issue, but being paid to produce the material has been an issue. So
Yeah.
still trying to figure out a way to make that work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I'm not destitute. I'm not out on the street,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a struggle.
And this is increasingly so as life becomes harder for journalists to make a living.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Those journalists were getting good salaries,
Mm-hmm.
and the journalism profession has been shrinking,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also created opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're able to
Does
get those opportunities.
the emergence of Chat GPT, AI that can create stories, has that affected journalism at all, as far as you know?
Well, journalism for years, they wouldn't admit it, but the editorial philosophy of journalism mirrors the business philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So when journalists talk about truth, veracity and facts and verification, they're doing that as a selling point.
Mm-hmm.
Come to me first because I have the info. I have the actual info. I have the facts.
Right.
And I had the facts before this person. I got the scoop.
Mm-hmm.
I had the info quickly, right? How Chat GP is going to get around that, I'm not quite sure. How are you going to get around there is no getting around the truth. There's no getting around the facts. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work with journalism. I have no idea, but I know that it is a concern right now of those writers who are out on strike.
Mm-hmm.
So some stories Chat GP might be able to tell, but not all stories.
But not all stories,
Not
right?
all stories.
Right, because it's a concern in the classroom, right? In composition classrooms, are you writing the paper, or is ChatGPT writing your paper? But
But in terms of highlights and or achievements, being able to produce a document,
mm-hmm.
do something that documents my work, like no doubt the murders of Oscar Grant. I'm sitting in a courtroom every day hearing the testimony of what happened to Oscar Grant.
Mm-hmm.
He was shot in the back and killed January 1st, 2009. I'm going to let you know what was said every day in that courtroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you what I think and feel about what I heard every day in that courtroom. So that's a document now that you can have. That's a record of that experience. The book I have coming out now, the interviews I did on KPFK, some of them were interviews that were meant for KPFK or meant for broadcast. They ended up gathering dust and I didn't get them out there. Others, they're just simply recordings, speeches or lectures that I recorded and did not get to air them either. But because I either recorded them, I had permission to record them, had a hand in setting up the lecture and getting the person to speak, that's included in the book also. So again, here's a document of some activities that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always a highlight, always a joy.
Nice. So in this corporate controlled environment, right? Because that's right, they own pretty much everything, right? The broadcast media, the cable news. Sometimes you're looking at a channel thinking it's independent, it's actually owned by somebody else. I'm watching this channel, Africa in Focus, but it's really coming from Voice of America. And so there's, so all these levels of state and corporate intervention. So how can community controlled media break through? How can it reach its constituency in that type of environment?
Well, again, it goes back to a media plan. And if you don't consider yourself an activist, if you don't consider yourself an organizer, you consider yourself to be a media maker, what is your plan for letting people know about your quote unquote product, your radio show, your YouTube channel? You have to have a plan to let people know. For the longest, that plan was advertising. But the times that we live in, and as we're talking about here a JoCo collective, sitting down and having deep conversation, deep thought about critical issues that affect us as a people, it has to be tied to some activism.
Right.
It has to be tied to some organizing. And you have to let people know through your networks what it is you're doing. There's an Instagram account that I follow, and I see advertising on this. It's I want to call it hood news. It is news, but it's geared toward, you're not gonna see it on KTLA.
Okay.
You're always gonna see it on KCAL. It's that round the way information.
Right.
So one of the advertisers they have on there, what's the name of it? It's called Strippers and something.
Okay. All right.
Strippers. That's the part I remember, strippers.
Right.
Like,
Right.
oh Lord. You and I, we're not talking about what the strippers NIM is talking about.
Right. Right. Right.
But they're utilizing another channel to get out the knowledge of the existence of their program, of their product, of their channel. We have to do the exact same thing.
Sponsorship, maybe local sponsorship.
But also you got to, if we were organizing, what did they do back in the day? They took a stack of flyers, they went door to door, knocking on doors, talking to people, standing out there in front of the Crenshaw Shopping Center with flyers. And if it wasn't flyers, it was Too Short and Nipsey Hussle selling CDs and cassette tapes out the trunk of their car.
There it is.
It was Elin Harris going to beauty shops, selling his books out the trunk of his car. That's the same thing that we have to do with these programs of ours. I'm one person. I'm one person with mobility issues. I ain't gonna be in front of Crenshaw and Slauson telling people about this my radio show, but I'm gonna figure out something to do.
Right, but and you can send somebody out. I mean,
I'm gonna send somebody else out there.
That's right.
Crenshaw and Slauson.
That's right. That's right. And so that brings us, or at least for me, right, back to the top where we're talking about social media. So again, that's an avenue we can take, right, to get the word out, take advantage of that access, that democratization.
Absolutely, we have to take it. Don't get me started.
And even if you might not be reaching the audience that cable news reaches, which doesn't reach the audience that the broadcast news reaches, but you're reaching people though.
You can
people will reach people.
There's two people you can reach somebody, which is a beautiful thing, or you can target and reach the people you want to reach. Targeted response and just general.
Right on.
But it's right there. Again, everyone has access to it. We got ring lights and microphones with wind screens and earbuds. 14-year-olds on their phone.
That's right.
Creating content.
That's right. That's
ain't
right.
got to do all of that. You don't have to have a camera with equipment on their shoulder. Got to go home with Big Gay every night. They got their phone.
That's right.
When Oscar Grant was murdered, people had, I thought they had, they said digital cameras. I thought they had little digital cameras. People had their cell phones.
Cell phones out,
And the police put out their narrative of what happened to Oscar Grant. This was in the early morning hours, January 1st. He's murdered by 2 a.m., 2:15, he's dead. So overnight, into the morning, into the next night, the police narrative is out there. By that, I want to say second day, absolutely by the third day, John Burris, the attorney for Oscar Grant's family, was on the news saying, oh, my office has been contacted by X number of people who said, that's not what happened. Here's my video. When the trial was held here in Los Angeles, right down there at the courthouse, Shortridge, Clara Folks, somebody. You know, y'all know, if it's a LA audience, y'all know where the courthouse is. 6 videos were entered into evidence. One of those was BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit Association footage. The other 5 were from people. All of those videos were telling the story of what happened that night. One of the women even testified, I pulled out my phone and started recording because I heard all this cursing and yelling. And when I looked out, when she peeped out the window or out the door of it was a cop doing all of that. She pulled out her phone and started recording. So yeah, absolutely. You don't need, I mean, all of this equipment is nice. This is my little ring light right over here. But all you need is your phone.
Yeah. And so again, yeah, the citizen journalist on the spot.
Citizen journalist.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, we wouldn't have known about Rodney King if it wasn't for the big camera at the time, and then it's just
that was the technology at the time.
That was the technology at
the time. Ramsey Orta, the man who filmed Eric. Now you know I forgot the brother's name. You say these names over and over again, and then why you stop saying my what's my brother's name? Eric in New York.
In New York. Yeah, I'm with you. I've drawn a blank on the last name too, but brother Eric.
Garner.
Eric Garner in New York.
Yes.
Philando Castile's wife.
Yep.
I think she went live on Facebook.
Yeah, I think so.
We know it was recorded, but I think she went live on Facebook, telling us they've just shot him and showing us him, right? It was Mike. I found out about Mike Brown because somebody's saying, "Oh my God, somebody just got shot right in front of me," and you see the body of. This was on Twitter, but the person was on their phone. You could see Mike Brown laying in the street.
Yeah,
in Ferguson, Missouri. It was one other person after I was thinking about, but we know the names.
Right.
We know the names.
Yes.
And those whose stories or the ending of their stories we know about because of those phones.
Yes.
Thank God for those phones.
Yeah, right. Playing such a critical role in getting the word out and getting it out to the world too, not even just to the United States, right?
But exactly, not just in the United States, out to the entire world.
Yeah. Yes, that has been absolutely critical, right? And you know, would make it more imperative, I think, for the state, say, to pay somebody to foment diaspora wars, right?
Absolutely.
With those kinds of messages getting out, that kind of information getting out about conditions in the United States. So we have reached the end of our prepared questions. So, you know, I want to open it up. If, you know, Tasha or Mila, if you have some questions. So, and there's a question in the chat for you. Are there spaces where this kind of connect is being stored or archived or organized?
What kind of connect?
Or content. That was a typo, where this type of content that you were just describing is being archived or organized?
That's a good question. I know that, well, you know, there's because of the proliferation of this democratization, there's begun to be a proliferation of digital centers. USC has just started something new, and they named it after Charlotta Bass, who was the editor, publisher of the California Eagle, right down here on Central Avenue in Los Angeles. Now, the question of whether or not they have made inroads into the South LA community, made connections with other Black journalists, remains to be seen, but they have a digital center there. I know most of the platforms archive, or you can keep your information there, but a centralized location of particular content, I'm not familiar. And that doesn't mean that it isn't one out there. I'm just not sure what it is. But I know that I try my best to keep copies of all of my work. That's how I was able to do Some of Us Are Brave. I kept actual CD copies of every show that I produced.
And that might be a project for somebody. Get the word out that somebody want to create an archive of all this. These videos of state misbehavior.
George Floyd, that's the one I forgot.
Okay.
17-year-old child
Right.
videotaping the murder of George Floyd. But yes, that's a hell of a project.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it is.
It's a need,
Yeah,
an absolute
right,
need. So yeah.
right. And I really does, the not just the idea of a citizen journalism, right? But a citizen journalism in action that is really having impact.
Yeah, I'm beginning to wonder about that
Mm-hmm.
title, though, citizen journal. Well, I mean, yeah, okay. Yeah. Person who's not paid to do journalism,
Right, look at that.
citizen journalism. So, okay.
Right, okay. But that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up though. Because there is a craft involved, right? A skill, right? I mean, to being a
Yes.
journalist, right? Not just hey, guess what happens, or I'm gonna tell you to share this information. Could you talk about that a little? What does one need? What kind of skills does one need?
Uh,
To do that, to be a good journalist, or even just an adequate journalist.
I'm an adequate journalist. That's a good one. I'm continuously assessing my own skills,
Mm-hmm.
my own philosophical skills, as well as my technical skills. A healthy sense of skepticism. I saw where somebody put in the chat, be nosy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, be nosy, investigate. So definitely a sense of skepticism. Journalism, it has been said that journalism rests upon a discipline of verification.
Mm-hmm.
You have to verify. And also, interestingly enough, and this began, I think, I want to say it began around 2008, 2009 with the downturn in the
Mm-hmm.
economy. So many journalism jobs were being slashed.
Mm-hmm.
Newspapers in particular, mainstream presses, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, etc. The consolidation of ownership,
Mm-hmm.
editors being brought in to slash the editorial staff, people just bailing out left and right, and you get, with that heavy turnover and that turmoil, if you are an observer of media, I work in media, but I consume media, I work in media, so I'm an observer of media.
Mm-hmm.
You began to see more and more a reliance on anonymous sources.
Mm-hmm.
Well, according to an anonymous source who was not authorized to speak on the issue, you have to verify what you're going to put out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't get someone who's going to go on the record, as they say, according to General Colin Powell, the President Bush had no weapons of mass destruction.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to just rely on, it used to be a time where people relied on anonymous sources sparingly.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's every other story, every single day, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
If you cannot verify what it is you're talking about, you're not supposed to put it out there in theory.
Mm-hmm.
But a verification, a willingness to dig for facts and stick to the facts, brevity, being able to take a story and put it into bite-sized. I'm looking into I keep looking at the chat because everything keeps popping up.
Right.
Being able to tell a story quickly and briefly. There's also what they have, long form journalism.
Mm-hmm.
That's for other areas. Like, for example, used to be back in the day, a Sunday paper where
Right.
you have long pieces. Most of American, if not all American journalism, is based on the newspaper model. So if you think about what it used to be to hold up a newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
almost bite-sized stories,
Yeah.
several bite-sized stories. When you would watch the news, come home, watch the news either 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock p.m., several stories in a row,
Mm-hmm.
bite-sized stories,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the ability to write long form and go into further depth would be that would be used for magazines, either related to the newspaper or a magazine in its own right, or maybe a Sunday newspaper, right? Objectivity is a principle of journalism that has been contested for several years.
Yeah.
And there's many journalists who will tell you there's no such thing as objectivity, and there were some people who demand objectivity. Basically, what it comes down to is, how do you keep the reporter out of the story? I'm just giving you the facts: who, what, when, where, why, and how. But if I begin to tell you how I feel about the story, now we've strayed from basic reporting, basic facts. We may have ventured into editorializing at this point. You didn't come to me for an editorial, you just came to me for the straight facts.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So the thing about objectivity, there's a book called, I want to say it's called Just the Facts: How Objectivity Came to Define American Journalism. The author's name is Mindch or Mintch. He's got an entire chapter devoted to Ida B. Wells. He asked the question, how do you objectively report on a lynching? We can put that to today. How would I, or how am I supposed to, as a Black woman, objectively report on the police shooting of Oscar Grant?
Right.
On the police strangling of Eric Garner? I'm supposed to just tell you what happened. But now again, when we talk about verification, who are my sources? What are the sources you're getting your information from? Are you getting it from police press releases? Eric Garner was illegally selling cigarettes without a license. He was approached by police officers who attempted to take him into custody. He resisted arrest, and he ended up succumbing. That's what the police
version. Yeah.
That's what the police version would say. So that's cool. What in that police version is facts, and what is spin from the police? That is a skill that we all need to incorporate, whether we're journalists or not. You as the reader, as the consumer, need to be able to understand what is called spin or called propaganda, but I'm digressing. Truth, facts, a discipline of verification, of sourcing, brevity, being able to write quickly and in short bites. Because I don't know if you know this, but you might not know this because you're not taking a journalism class, but it has been said by many for years, newspapers in particular is geared toward an audience of an 8th grade reading level.
I've heard that, for years. Yeah. For
years, right. A particular reading level. I want to say that there was a report not too long ago that maybe half of the US is not even reading on that level anymore.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, that they might be at 6th grade level.
Yeah, that's scary. That's scary as hell.
Yes, it is.
But point being, I'm sure that there are some other factors, but I'm having brain fog at the moment. I did not write down the notes of what constitutes journalism, but absolutely a skepticism, a desire to know more. But now here's the problem. The problem for me comes in with how much is too much. How much is too much info? There is no single journalistic code that any media platform has that journalists must adhere to. There's the Society of Professional Journalists code, which many journalists take as their personal code, but there's nothing mandatory. part of that code from the Society of Professional Journalists says to do no harm.
Yes, okay.
And I think that we can agree much of the reporting in America creates harm for Black people.
Yes.
It was in 1829 when Freedom's Journal said, we wish to plead our own cause. For too long have others spoken for us. This is the first Black newspaper in the United States. They was like, now we tired of hearing what you talking about. We got to speak for ourselves.
Right.
Harm was being done. So what is the harm that's being done? For example, when a Jordan, what's the brother's name? Jordan?
Neely.
Neely, I started to say Neely. I'm forgetting names. At this point, I'm forgetting names. It's too much information. At the age where I can, when Jordan Neely is, and we see it, mind you, because somebody was on the train with their cell phone. Someone approaches him from behind, puts him in a headlock, a chokehold, and kills him. And what does the media do? They do not name this killer, but they do know enough that he's a former Marine. How did you find out he was a former Marine? Don't you need a name to get his service record? Okay, never mind, fine. Okay, fine, whatever. You're not going to identify him. Okay. Jordan Neely was it New York Post, New York Times headline. Jordan Neely has had 40 arrests.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
You can name the homeboy that does it, but you got his arrest record out there.
40 arrests. Now, the problem with that, we needed to know this because why? It's true, right? Journalism is the truth. So it's true. It's been verified. Does it create harm? Well, it's not necessarily harming Jordan because he's dead. What it does do, however, is it continues a narrative of the criminalization of Black people in general.
That's right.
Black men in particular.
That's correct.
It justifies the treatment meted out to Black people in general, Black men in particular, because it continues the narrative of this criminality, this unpredictableness, this need to be put down, this need of anything that happens to them is justified. That creates harm to our communities.
That's right.
Now, as a consumer of media, you may feel, well, this is information I need to know. My question is why? Why do you need to know that about this individual who is no longer living? The only reason I can think of is so that you will continue to support the police and those that employ the police to continue to do what they've been doing.
There it is.
You have no problem with this person's life being, they weren't arrested, they weren't tried, they weren't convicted, they weren't sentenced, they were summarily executed.
Summarily executed
on the spot
by a private citizen.
And you don't have a problem with that?
That's right.
Really? Wow. Media does us harm every single day, even when they're telling the truth, even when they're reporting the facts.
Even when they're reporting the facts. That's right.
It's factual, it is the truth, but it does harm because it's in furtherance of an agenda that is meant to harm us.
Yes. We got a couple of questions in the chat, the ones that were distracting you. I don't want us to have.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to stop looking at all that. I'll just wait for you to let me know.
So let's see. I think what we got to the one I think that Tasha was saying. I asked the question that she was going to ask about, what are those skills? So then Mila.
I'm sure there are more, but I'll have to get that back to y'all on the on a follow-up. I'm sure there are more skills.
Yeah, okay. Well, that was great. I thought your answer was very rich, right? And quite informative.
Mhm.
Emila's asking, do you believe that print is dying due to the shift towards social media and digital obsession?
Print is dying.
Is it?
Well, see, I don't have the demographics in front of me, but I would venture, I don't think it's an audience large enough for a paper to be profitable.
Okay.
I believe there's still an audience out there for print,
Mhm.
because for years, I never understood why it was certain things like, I guess, you call to make, it was something that had to do with the telephone.
Mhm.
And I think it was people, there were people who actually still had rotary phones, so they
Mhm.
could not press 0.
Right.
So there's still an audience out there of maybe not necessarily people who, those of us who are bibliophiles, we want to actually read a book. We want
Right.
to hold the book in our hand. We ain't going out with a Nook and a tablet and Kindle and all that stuff. But whereas with print, they might, for example, older folks might not have access to computers. People in rural areas, their internet Wi-Fi may be spotty or
Mhm.
cost prohibitive, or they don't have a landline,
Right.
so they're not able to access digital through their home. They may not have a smartphone. They may just have a cell
Mhm.
phone for emergencies. And so they're
Mhm.
not gonna, destroy their eyes trying to read a little old tiny
Right.
screen of the LA Times. So I'm
Right.
sure that there's an audience still out there. I would not know the demographics, but we do know that the audience has diminished substantively
Mhm.
because of the digital age, because of social media. People were sharing stuff, information online for free.
Mhm.
And that's why
Yeah.
subscribership dropped.
Right. You can get it for free. Why
Why?
not get it
You
for
can
free?
get it for free.
Yeah. Totally, and everything costs. So shoot, what you can get for free, you go ahead and get.
Somebody says, hey, I don't care how much money I make, free is free.
Free is free.
Okay.
That's right. That's how you keep your money. Let's see. Tasha asked a question. Oh yeah, and actually speaking to your description of the skill set, would you consider putting something together like a guide of principles of quality journalism in whatever format that would be?
Sure.
Audio, video.
Sure. Because then I'd have to actually go and study it, and as opposed to just spouting off the top of my head.
Yeah, you did pretty good spouting off the top of your head, though. I thought that was pretty substantial myself.
Okay.
In the moment, it was. I mean, I'm sure there's more that could be said, right? But that was quite substantial, I thought. Just some basic principles.
Yeah, and basic principles that are, what's the word I want to say? You can't necessarily argue.
Mm-hmm.
We can argue about objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way to write without inserting yourself all into the story,
Right.
without inserting your viewpoint all into the story, but still gets key essential points across. Because if you think about it, you want to talk about being objective, you choose which stories you want to cover.
Exactly.
You
Yes.
choose which stories you want to write about, which stories you want to report on. Again, going back to the founding of American journalism and newspapers, there's a reason why a particular story is the headline, why there's a story on page 1 and at the back of the newspaper, why there's a story in the top right corner and the bottom left corner. There are reasons for this. Those are all decisions made by human beings, not bots.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They're made by human beings.
Tandi, do you have time for two more questions?
Sure.
Mila?
Actually, Mr. Arthritis is not knocking on the door just yet.
All right. Thank you,
Do one,
Mr.
two
Arthritis.
questions,
You take your time.
Mr. Ritus.
Mila, you have a question. Actually, Mila has the two questions.
Okay.
Yes. Hi, Thandi. I just wanted to say thank you for joining us today. This was really great.
Thank you for having me.
Great intro back into our programs. I missed it so much. So for my questions, when you were speaking about the police murders, and I seen that you have a book. I Googled it and I'm not sure because it didn't necessarily say your name, but it was, I think, an anthology on Trayvon Martin.
No, that's a book that I was a part of. It's called Killing Trayvons, looking at violence in the US. So I had 2 essays in that book.
Okay. So I was just wondering, like, as far as when you were speaking on information gathering and the truth and everything, and do you find that, like, in your process to find the information, do you speak with the investigators and detectives? Do you attend the trials? Or do you have like access to the police data, like the databases or anything to get your information?
So this is how many investigative reporters are able to function, is because of the resources, either the personal resources that they have or the resources of the media outlet they're working for. Many databases require a fee. Who's going to pay that fee monthly, yearly, in order to ensure that access? Access is a perk, and it's something that journalists guard closely. And if you piss off a reporter, I'm sorry, if you piss off a police person, a police spokesperson, you're going to get the cold shoulder from now on. You're no longer going to have access. That's one of the reasons why certain reporters, they never, ever write anything that is going to be critical of police, because they're afraid of losing access.
Right.
So, and again, that goes back to the business model.
Right.
I'm going to follow Yusef instead of Tasha, because Yusef be having all that background info. He be having all this and having all of that. So you should check out what he's writing as opposed to what this person is, because they're just going to give you, you know, the bim, bam, bam, who, what, when, why, how. There's I have a list of journalism films that I created just for my own personal use. But one of the films is called State of Play. It's based on something in the UK, but it stars Russell Crowe, Ben Affleck. Check out State of Play. And when he's a reporter, it doesn't say Washington Post, but we know it's the Washington Post. Anyway, fictional film. Check out State of Play and look at the reporter Russell Crowe in terms of the source. He's friends with the coroner, somebody working the coroner's office who lets him in off hours. He's going through the dead person's cell phone and taking notes. And he know the guard at the hospital who gives him a call. He's friends with him, but a lot of times it's not based on friendship. You know the reason why TMZ had the story of Michael Jackson's death before anybody else? People don't consider Harvey Levin a journalist. If I said Harvey Levin was a journalist, the journalist would be, how dare you, they'd scoff. What he reported was factual. It was true. People were mad at Harvey Levin because he reported on the death of Kobe Bryant before his wife and folks could find out about it. He had the scoop first. It was true. It was factual. Do you know how Harvey Levin is able to get all that information? He pays those people.
Okay.
Who do you think called him and told him Michael Jackson's dead? Kobe done crashed. How do you think he know that information? He's an attorney, so he knows what he's doing. Now he's got this platform. I think Miller, that might be your audio.
Oh yeah, it is. There you go.
With the feedback. The information's factual. He's an attorney. He's got this multi-million-dollar, if not billion-dollar, media platform.
Yep.
He can afford to pay. If you get a tip, if you get a scoop, call me. It was probably the paramedics. that called and told Harvey, yo, what did we hear about I want to call it the Kobe Bryant trial. It was sheriff's deputies
It was the deputy.
sharing those photos of Kobe's remains. These are the people who call Harvey Levin. Why? So he can bring you the information before anyone else. So now the journalists are sitting around trying to verify officially from the paramedics, from the hospital. Do you have Michael Jackson? I can't say anything. Meanwhile, the ambulance driver's like, yo, Harvey, check this out. Blah, 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 blah. And Harvey slips that man some dollars. So when people who have access to all of these different sources, it's not always friendship.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I'm just saying this is a resource. I ain't got no money to be paying all of the I can't pay the security guards. I can't pay the lady working in the corner. I can't pay all these people.
Right.
So I'm not going to have all of that background information. The person who's got the background information, they're going to give you a good story. They're going to give you a true story. But again, it's the question of resources.
Yeah.
And a lot of Black papers, a lot of Black media don't have those resources. But Black media is going to give you yourself, though. Black media will give you yourself back to you.
Right.
Well, I don't want you to think Black media must always be supported.
Yeah.
It must always be supported, especially when they do us wrong. That's when you put your foot up in them. What the hell are you doing, man?
What you doing? That's right.
That was a long answer.
Mila, did you have a second question?
That was a long. Y'all about to stop me because I can go.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, like from your past career as the editor of the newspaper and as a news anchor, assistant editor, excuse me. Did you have to contain yourself or like resist the urge to like portray things, or like when you wrote certain things, like how did you navigate your power in that space?
I had to fight for a particular story, and it was 2008, 2009-ish, and a woman came to the paper because she did not believe her son had committed suicide at the LA County Jail. And I told the editor and see, again, this also goes to the knowledge base of the reporter. We were talking earlier about social media and what it is that people know. If the reporter does not have the knowledge base, right, you're covering, and I don't just mean for Black media, I mean in general. If you're covering the Black community, it helps if you know particular things. But I'm at a Black newspaper, and I had an editor at the time who was young, a graduate of journalism, of a journalism school, had a degree in journalism. But because of my background in activism, because I've been places and I know people, I know that Black men are murdered in county jails.
Right.
I knew Chokwe Lumumba when he was working on cases in Jackson, Mississippi, where Black men were said to have committed suicide by hanging themselves with their shoelaces.
Right.
So when this mother comes to the LA Watts Times and says, I don't believe my son committed suicide in the LA County Jail, my position is it's not going to hurt to tell her story. Well, it's not really anything there, blah, 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 blah. Just tell her story. What space is that taking up in the paper from something crucial? And we eventually talked about it in the paper. I can't give you specifics now. It took a while to get to it. And then a year, if not a year or two, however many years later, there came a report about the conditions in LA County Jail that drive people to suicide. It didn't say that people were, that the sheriff's deputies were strangling people and then making it look like they committed suicide with their shoelaces. It talked about conditions in the jail actually driving people to suicide.
Mm.
And so that's the kind of story that I had to basically fight with the editor about getting covered. He
Right.
even, like I said, he put somebody on it, and I felt like they half-hearted reported on it.
Mhm.
That was because, like I said, my relationship with Chokwe Lumumba, my knowledge of that history, I knew, yes, it's absolutely possible your son
Mhm.
did not commit suicide.
Right. We have come to the end, or near the end, because I
But
would
did,
like to
did, did
ask.
that answer the question? Because again,
I think it did. Did
I
it,
get
Mia?
lost.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
that definitely answered the question.
Okay.
I have one more question to close, and really it's the forward-looking question, because we call this series, when we started, the world we want.
Mhm,
So I'm curious, in the world we want, right, a more just world,
mhm,
a world where capitalism isn't ruling everything, and
mhm,
people are living in community.
mhm.
How do you see journalism in that world, in a more just world, that world we would like to live in and that we're trying to create?
We need a journalism that is not based on profit. A journalism that, of course, is not in support of a white supremacist agenda.
Mm-hmm.
A journalism that truly does no harm, that provides us the facts and information we need, but also reflects our reality back to us.
Mm-hmm.
It reflects our reality back to us. And it's not just limited to journalism,
Mm-hmm.
which is based on facts, which is based on the truth, quote unquote, as opposed to fiction, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to movies, as opposed to fictional movies, fictional novels. These are all parts of media, but there's fiction and there's nonfiction. We need a nonfiction media that does no harm, that reflects who we are back to us. And I use this example all the time. Billboards are media,
Mm-hmm.
mugs are media, t-shirts,
Mm-hmm.
everything is media, but then you have mass media. When I look in my family, as an example, I see, and some of this, of course, has to do with values. That's another discussion for another Joko collective session. I see husbands and ex-husbands. I don't see a lot of baby daddies. The husbands and the ex-husbands outnumber the baby daddies. The wives and the ex-wives outnumber the baby mamas.
Mm-hmm.
I look at my family and I know that Black men love Black women and are married to them forever.
Yeah.
I don't need to see that in media in order to know that it is true, that it is a fact. But it would be nice to have my reality reflected back to me.
Indeed.
It would be nice to see that on a billboard. It would be nice to see that in a major film, on a big screen. It would be nice to see that flooding my consciousness. It would be nice to see my reality reflected back to me.
Indeed.
I don't particularly have to have that, but it would be great. Now, there are some people out there who really do need those images.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Those images are needed. Those stories are needed. So a journalism that provides for our needs in order to help us get the world that we need, we have to practice the journalism that we need.
All right.
We have to practice the media production and content that we need.
I think that is a great final word.
Mhm.
Let me do this again, because I wasn't doing it when I was supposed to. That was supposed to be up during the Q&A, but that's all good. So we are at the end. Thank you again, Thandi. This was a great as Mila said, a great way to get restarted after our long hiatus. And just kudos, right? Kudos to you. This was a classic. Thank you.
Why, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate y'all having me. Appreciate you thinking about me. Appreciate you, especially Sister Tasha, for bugging me until we finally got it done.
Yes, indeed.
That's right.
Yes,
That's
indeed.
right.
Tasha was on it.
Must
you,
have
Tasha.
Thandi.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Thandisizwe.
No problem. And thank you all for the work you're doing.
You are very welcome.
Yes,
Trying to
you're
do the
welcome.
people's work.
Hey, you're not trying, you are doing it.
There we go.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Thank
So
you.
that's it, folks. YouTube audience, thank you for checking in. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe if you aren't a subscriber, and don't forget to share.
Share the video.
Share the video. So there we go.